Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Pushper, your host for the day of JLL Live here at Disrupt CRE in Chicago. My next guest is Matt Waggoner. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Matt, you're the co-lead for the Indianapolis Tenant Rep Group, right?
Yep.
But in addition to just helping companies find space and evaluate their space and figure out their whole portfolio, you do a lot more than just that, right? You specialize in a way.
Sure.
Tell me about that.
Sure. So yeah, we work with companies that occupy space, occupiers, to help them think through a real estate strategy. And the old way that tenants and companies had historically looked at things was through a cost model. It would start off and say, how much does the space cost? And very little consideration for the cultural and operational aspects of the business. So we define that approach as the how much does it cost approach. It's shifted quite a bit to a new approach where space is viewed as a competitive advantage in the marketing and hiring for employees. Also, the employee engagement's a key indicator for the space functionality. And then also you have brand, which is becoming ever important and needs to be embodied in the space in some respect.
Right.
So we've shifted the conversation from how much does it cost to what is the value, or how do we maximize the value of our office space. And what
that's a big difference, cost
huge
versus value.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right. So what it does is it gets us into the room a lot earlier at the highest strategic conversations that are happening in the C-suite, to make sure that their organizational objectives are encompassed and embodied in the ultimate real estate strategy, and it helps ultimately the office space do more for the company.
It sounds like, I hear some of the terms of like bring your whole self to work.
Yeah.
Does that touch on that and really make companies think more about their employees
Sure.
and what's going on?
Yeah, there's been many folks that we talk to that talk about it's not about a business strategy anymore, it's about a people strategy. And that's not dissimilar with the way that real estate's approached now too. So last year we actually started a community around this that was seeded by a workplace innovation competition.
Okay.
So we asked companies in Indianapolis and throughout Indiana actually 4 major questions. And those questions were, how does your space promote productivity, collaboration, and connectivity?
Okay.
What's the one unforgettable thing about your space? That's always a fun one to listen to people answer. How is your space a reflection of your company's brand and culture? And then the last one was, how does it impact the engagement of the employee base? So the neat thing about that was you have all these people who are very proud of their space that submitted. We had 64 companies that represented almost 6,000 employees.
Wow.
And then beyond that, you have a group of what we call onlookers, or people who wanted to learn and seek that. But they're not doing it from a third party, a neutral person who's advising them. They're doing it from their peers. They're seeing firsthand. They're not seeing macro trends. They're seeing actual peer examples of that. So what it created was an authenticity, and it allowed them to not only be educated on what's important in the workplace, but also very inspired.
Talk to me a little bit more about that communities that you're saying,
Yeah.
and that's how you make your office space do more?
Yeah. So the idea of community is that it's not our team pushing information to them, telling them what they need to do. It's not them getting on Google and seeing what Apple does or what Google does and saying open workspace works for us or closed space works for us. It's a community of peer-to-peers where you have companies that are showing their thoughtfulness about how they approach each of these different ways, and then other companies that can learn from that. So it's really elevating the entire workplace evolution and workplace strategy for companies, which we believe helps with their people strategy. It helps with all these other objectives that they're trying to meet.
It's almost like crowdsourcing ideas of how to make your employees happier.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
and that goes with all the trends that we've been seeing recently about more transparency. And I don't mean just in real estate or technology, I just mean in the world, right? Like
Absolutely.
everybody wants everything anyway.
Yeah.
So this sounds like a lot of that, let's share information. It's
Yep.
not something you can just Google very easily.
Right.
So here at JLL and with your group,
Yep.
you've created a way for them to do that,
Sure,
right?
that's exactly right, yeah. And so what we've learned about the pre-education process is that it allows tenants to come to us with a baseline understanding or a common speak that we would say that helps them to identify their ambitions or to help them realize their ambitions. So some of those things are that the workplace is a very, very critical decision, but it's also super complicated. This whole strategy around what do? We know we want to change things, but how do we do it?
And it's funny you say that because people do look at their workplace as a simple decision that they can put off sometimes till the end too, right?
Yes. Yeah, but then when you look at human capital costs, and we have tools that we use that show that those are sometimes between 10 and up to 20 or 25 times more expensive or higher than real estate costs. So when you start to look at those two things, how could you impact a decision that's 10 or 20 times more to save a little bit of money on real estate. So intertangling both of those, and then also understanding that trends are not something to chase. We want to, we let them understand the common speak through the community aspect and learning from their peers. But then what JLL, our team, does with that is we use our tools, we use our resources, our data, which is massively important, and our expertise to help them achieve those ambitions that they've identified or that they've realized. So
stay on top of the trends instead of trying to catch up after the fact.
Yeah, and recognizing that trends are just that, they're trends. They may go in and out, and we don't want things to go in and out. We don't want you to do something because somebody else did it. We want you to learn from what they did and then look inward and understand what's important for your business, for your employees, and help create a custom approach so that works for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so how does being pre-educated by seeing what other companies are doing, how does that help them be more thoughtful as it relates to real estate?
Yeah. So yeah, it's really about establishing that baseline understanding. It's allowing them to understand that the workplace is important. So it's just elevating their understanding of what impact the workplace has. As I mentioned, the old model was what does it cost?
Right.
It's the goal of the community or the pre-education process is that they understand all of the elements that make for a holistic workplace strategy, not just isolating one of those cost issues.
And let's talk about some of that because I think you were mentioning to me different ways that people work, right?
Yep.
So it's not just the cubes and the
right,
and the conference rooms and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so how does some of that play in to what you're seeing as examples that people are doing? What are some of the cool stuff that you're seeing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say variety is probably, I'm going the cop-out route of doing a general observation, but companies that have a variety of different options for their folks to work. So for example, whereas the old days where you have a private office or a cube, now you may have a dedicated workspace. We're not calling it an office or a cube, but a dedicated workspace that you would go. You also have 4 or 5 options. You know, you maybe have a standing desk, you have a workable cafe or lounge. We've even seen, you know, a lot of outdoor elements that folks want to give their employees. Absolutely. Yeah, give them the opportunity to utilize. So I think flexibility.
I'd love a rooftop, by the way.
Would you? Yeah.
Well, if anybody's wondering.
It's good, yeah. And in Indiana, it can be a little iffy this time of year with the rain and snow, but where you're from in Miami, I think workplace works better. So, but yeah, so the variety and giving them the flexibility within the space so that there's not a monotony or there's not a stagnancy in their workplace. They've got to, you know, when they need to shift ideas or shift focus, they go to a different area within the space, which ultimately makes them more productive. It keeps them engaged in the workspace.
Collaboration.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
And I want to take a moment because I know we're about to come out of our time here, but what's your website? Because I checked out your website and I thought it was really cool, and that allowed me to look at all those different entries you were talking about that people submitted and the different kinds of space. And give a little plug for that.
Sure,
before we go out.
So Spaces Indiana is the name of our website. Again, it's seated with 64 of some of Indiana's best companies, and it just gives a lens into, you know, not only some visual pictures of their workspace, but also some thoughtfulness of these questions that we ask them to answer, and that's what we ultimately judge them on. So
that's terrific.
Very helpful, yeah.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
And for everyone at home, we'll be right back.